Hi, welcome. In this video I'm going to be restoring this votive candle stand, which would have once lived in a Catholic church but now occupies a corner of a bar in Belfast called the Spaniard. So there are 45 individual bulbs or candles, each operated by the press of a button, but there are quite a few pieces missing. A lot of the lights don't work at all. In fact, out of the 45 candles that are supposed to be there, currently we have a grand total of 12 that actually work. A few of the red glass candle holders are missing, as are some of the white plastic inserts that make it look a bit more like a candle. We've got switches, bulbs also missing, and quite a bit of damage to the bodywork, especially those brass strips. The wood is in a bit of a sorry state in places. So all in all, it needs a bit of TLC. To get a first look at what's going on inside, I'm just going to pop off this back panel, which luckily is held on with just 2 screws. Very simple. Off comes the back. And oh my goodness. This isn't going to be as simple as I thought. It's a real spaghetti junction. Looks like miles of wiring. Dozens of individual circuit boards. And what have we got here? A loose wire on the transformer. Not a great start. These glass cups that house the light bulbs, they're all quite loose. They were just held in by a single screw each underneath. And then they just need a little bit of gentle persuasion to get them out of the hole. And then you've got this kind of plastic insert made of 2 pieces, a kind of cap. And then this bottom section which houses the bulb. The bulb's held in with just this tiny piece of black foam squeezed in there. Strange. There's the cup. And there's the bulb. So I've gone ahead and removed all the cups from the top row because I want to get a closer look at these red buttons. You can see that they're sprung, but this one on the right has lost its spring. So I'm going to take off the screws that hold the brass panel, which will hopefully give me access to the underside of the buttons. And voila, there they are. And that button hasn't just lost its spring, it's lost its entire bottom half. So that'll need replaced. This is one of the glass cups that actually got damaged in transit. It got smashed into about a half dozen pieces. So I'm using a bit of clear epoxy adhesive to fix the pieces into place and then just leave them to set, to cure. 24 hours later and the result is not too bad, but we still have a couple of missing pieces leaving a gap. So we're going to try and fill those armed with some 2-part clear epoxy resin, a couple of bottles of dye in various shades of red. I've got a piece of white tack warming in some warm water to make it more pliable. First of all, I'm just going to make sure that the white tack is big enough to cover the affected area plus a wee bit extra. Then move it over to an area that doesn't have any cracks, that is pristine, and press it in firmly to get a really good impression of what should be there. Then move it back to the original position, and if we line it up just right, we should be able to fill this and recreate the hobnails that are missing. So with a bit of trial and error, I've mixed some of the red dye into the clear epoxy resin to what I think is quite close to the colour of the glass. So I'm just going to drizzle this in. It's quite runny, so it should just flow into the mould, and with a bit of luck it will hopefully recreate the missing pieces. Meanwhile, to get a better look at the internals, I'm going to remove the bottom panel, which means tilting it carefully onto its back. 3 screws this time. Should be 4, but there's one missing. And now we have much better access to those circuit boards, the wires, everything that's going on inside. And there's no shortage of bulb holders with disconnected wires, other disconnected wires, missing buttons, missing bulbs, all kinds of things that we can fix fairly quickly. Most of it just requires a bit of basic soldering, which I won't bore you with. Instead, I'd rather show you how the glass repair to the votive cup turned out. Here it is. Did you spot it? No, it's not perfect. There's a bit of loss of definition, and the colour is slightly lighter than the glass. But to the casual observer, I think it's pretty damn good. But we still have another 3 of these cups that are missing. I've trawled the internet and I've found very few candidates for replacements. But then on eBay I found a lady who has 4 almost identical cups, which I've gone ahead and bought, and hopefully they'll arrive in the next week or 2. However, that still leaves us with the problem of the missing plastic inserts. We're missing 3 of the lower kind of bulb holder parts and 8 of the upper caps or lids. Now there's pretty much 0 chance of finding these online. So I've gathered together a bunch of materials from which I'm hoping I can make suitable replacements. Starting with this flat sheet of 2mm thick plastic, I have marked out the circles that I need to cut, and using a 42mm hole saw, I've made this kind of guide for the saw blade, and then using the same hole saw, it's a fairly simple matter of just cutting through the plastic to create a disc. And after a little bit of cleaning up, that should do the job nicely. So here are the 8 discs that I need to make the missing caps. I've drilled these circular grooves using a smaller hole saw which matches the diameter of these short sections of plastic tubing or pipe, which in turn are a pretty good match for the original missing pieces. And to join them together, I'm using a specialist glue consisting of a primer, which you apply several thin coats of, and then this super glue type of adhesive, which is just about the only glue that will actually bond together this type of plastic. So, primer's already on, little bit of adhesive in the groove, and then once they're all ready, apply a bit of pressure in the form of a heavy book. The other piece, the bulb holder, it's a wee bit more complicated. But to start with, I've cut a slightly longer piece of the same plastic tubing, and I've cut and glued these 2 plastic lugs made from the same tubing. And this does a pretty good job of holding the lid in place, same as the original did. But that still leaves this kind of ring of plastic with a black foam washer. So I've cut 3 of the new washers just out of this piece of black foam, and I've also cut 3 discs from what was left of the sheet of plastic. I did that with a 32mm hole saw, and I'm now going to cut the inside of the ring using an 18mm hole saw. So a pair of old rusty pliers to hold it in place, and there again just a bit of cleanup and a bit of glue, and we should have a fairly convincing bulb holder. The next problem is these brass strips. They're in pretty bad shape, they're stained and tarnished, which basically just ruins the look of them and spoils the look of the whole piece, really. I tried a few different ways of polishing up the surface, but a lot of it's just too far gone. However, I then realised that the pieces are symmetrical, so if you turn them over, you get some nice, fresh, clean brass to work with. Again, it's not perfect, there's still tarnishes and blemishes that need taken out, but it's a much better starting point. And in true Blue Peter fashion, here's one I prepared earlier, and you can see it really is, it's come up beautiful. And I think these will complement the deep red of the votive glass perfectly, the way it was meant to look. Speaking of which, this parcel arrived this morning all the way from the US of A, containing 4 red bubble glass votive candle holders. These are a little bit smaller than mine, which I was kind of expecting. The glass is a little more red rather than orange red, but overall they're a pretty good match, apart that is from one fairly obvious difference: the lack of a hole in the base, which means I'm going to have to very carefully drill through not just 1 but 4 of these cups. So I've clamped one of the cups securely in this kind of wooden frame, which will also act as a guide for my diamond carbide tipped glass and ceramic hole saw. And I've also got my trusty water cooling system. Loosen the cap to release the water and very carefully drill a hole. So let's have a look at the result. Yep, that's pretty good. Just 3 more to go. Before I start piecing everything back together, I just want to say a quick word about the electronics. I didn't film much of the electronics repairs. That's a bit nerdy even for me. But that did take up probably the majority of the time working on this. Partly because you spend a lot of time waiting for parts to arrive, but also I don't know very much about electronics. So after doing all the relatively simple stuff, soldering wires back on, replacing bulbs, replacing broken or missing buttons, I was very disappointed to find that there were still about 30 of the circuits not working. And one of the culprits is these 5-pin connectors. Those little V-shaped plates are supposed to cut into the insulation and make contact with the wire inside, but they don't work very well, so I've had to replace a couple of dozen of these. Very time consuming. Then I had a couple of these circuit boards where something had obviously been spilt inside the thing and had got onto the board and eaten away some of the copper tracks that make up the circuit board. So I did some crude but effective repairs using a bit of tinned copper wire, and that seems to have worked a treat. At the heart of each circuit is one of these 1990s IC chips. I'd say at least 30 of these had blown, but luckily they're fairly cheap and relatively easy to replace. And finally, special mention has to go to this little chap, a BS170P transistor, and I was able to work out by swapping components that this had failed in a lot of the circuits. Now, one of the ways you can tell which way round a transistor is supposed to go is because it has a curved face and a flat face. Here it is, curved face on the front, flat face on the back. And here is the equivalent that I bought as a replacement, also a BS170 transistor. Apparently for a circuit like this, the P doesn't make any difference. And it does indeed have a curved face and a flat face. So I made the substitution and it didn't work at all. Why? Because apparently another way to tell which way round a transistor goes is to look at the face that has the writing on it, which in this case is the opposite side. So figuring that out took a bit of time and a bit of gnashing of teeth, but we got there. So this is the collection of components that I've removed. It doesn't include the ones that were missing, the bulbs and switches, etc. that were not present. But this should give you some idea of what kind of state it was in before and how much it's improved now. So here it is, the grand reveal. Everything reassembled and back where it should be. All the glass and brass looking shiny and new. The wood I just gave a very light sanding and a couple of thin coats of shellac, and that's another big improvement. And finally, most importantly, all 45 candles now do what they're supposed to do. Push the button, they light up, they stay on for half an hour or so, after which they go out. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Do remember that I'm available for weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs in the greater Belfast area, so if you have something that needs a fix, get in touch.